Every single thing you do repeatedly becomes easier over time. Not because you are trying harder, not because you are more motivated, but because your brain is physically changing, literally rewiring itself, to make that behavior require less conscious effort, less decision-making energy, and less willpower with every repetition. That is not a metaphor. It is one of the most fundamental mechanisms of neurological adaptation. And understanding it changes everything about how you approach building the behaviors you want and dismantling the ones you do not. Because the reason bad habits are so hard to break is not that you are weak. It is that your brain has done exactly what it was designed to do, made the behavior automatic, efficient, and resistant to conscious override. And the reason good habits are so hard to build is not that you lack discipline. It is that you have been trying to build them the wrong way, fighting the mechanism instead of working with it. In this video, you are going to understand exactly how habits form in the brain, why the habits you want to break are so persistent, and the evidence-based framework that uses your brain's own wiring to build behaviors that actually last. The neurological foundation of habit formation is a process called chunking. The brain's ability to compress a sequence of actions into a single automated unit that can be executed with minimal conscious involvement. When you first learn to drive, every element of the process requires conscious attention. Checking mirrors, managing the clutch, steering, monitoring speed, anticipating traffic. The prefrontal cortex, your brain's center for conscious decision-making and effortful control, is heavily engaged. But with repetition, something remarkable happens. The basal ganglia, an ancient brain structure deep beneath the cortex, begins to take over the sequence. It compresses the individual steps into a single chunk that can be retrieved and executed automatically, without requiring conscious thought. This is why experienced drivers can navigate familiar routes while holding a conversation. The driving has been chunked and delegated to a brain system that operates below conscious awareness. This is not laziness. It is one of the most elegant efficiency adaptations that evolution produced. Your brain is conserving its most limited resource, conscious attention, by automating everything it can. The structure of every habit, whether useful or destructive, follows the same three-part pattern. A cue triggers the routine, and the routine delivers a reward. This is the habit loop, and it operates below conscious awareness in the vast majority of cases. The cue can be almost anything: a time of day, a location, an emotional state, a preceding behavior, or the presence of specific people. The routine is the behavior itself, the action sequence that the brain has chunked and automated. And the reward is the neurological signal that reinforces the loop, the dopamine release that tells the basal ganglia this sequence is worth remembering and repeating. The critical insight is that once this loop is established, the cue alone is sufficient to trigger craving, a motivational state that precedes the routine and drives you toward it, even when you consciously want to do something different. This is why willpower alone is insufficient for breaking habits. By the time you are consciously aware of the urge, the basal ganglia has already begun executing the routine. You are not fighting a choice. You are fighting an automated program. This has a specific and important implication for why bad habits are so resistant to elimination. The habit loop, once encoded in the basal ganglia, does not disappear with disuse. The neural pathway remains. What changes with abstinence is not the existence of the pathway, but its activation threshold, how easily the cue triggers the craving. This is why people who have been sober for years can still experience powerful urges when exposed to the original cues. It is why someone who gave up smoking decades ago can still feel the pull of a cigarette in specific situations. The habit is not gone. It is dormant. And the research on habit change consistently shows that the most effective strategy for eliminating an unwanted behavior is not suppression, which requires continuous willpower expenditure against an automated system, but substitution, keeping the cue and the reward while replacing the routine with a different behavior that delivers a similar neurological payoff. This is why people successfully replace cigarettes with exercise, replace stress eating with stress breathing, replace doom scrolling with journaling. The loop structure is preserved. the routine is swapped. Building new habits works through the same mechanism but in reverse. And the research identifies several variables that determine how quickly and how durably a new behavior gets encoded. The first is consistency of cue. The brain learns to associate behaviors with their triggering contexts, which means attaching a new behavior to an existing, reliable cue dramatically accelerates encoding. This is the principle behind habit stacking, placing a new behavior immediately after an established one, so that the existing behavior becomes the cue. After my morning coffee, I will do 5 minutes of breath work. After I sit at my desk, I will write 3 priorities before opening email. The specificity of the cue matters enormously. Vague intentions like "I will exercise more" produce far weaker neural encoding than precise cue routine pairings like "every day at 7 in the morning, I will put on my running shoes before I check my phone." The second variable is immediate reward. The basal ganglia learns through dopamine, and dopamine is released in response to rewards that are immediate and predictable. Behaviors that produce delayed rewards, like exercise, which produces health benefits weeks and months later, require bridging strategies that create immediate satisfaction. Tracking, social sharing, celebrating small wins, or pairing the behavior with something intrinsically enjoyable. The third variable is what researchers call friction, the number of steps, decisions, and obstacles that stand between you and the behavior. Research on behavior change consistently shows that small increases in friction produce large decreases in behavior frequency, and small decreases in friction produce large increases. The person who sleeps in their workout clothes removes a decision. The person who leaves their phone in another room removes a temptation. The person who prepares their supplements on the counter removes a barrier. These are not trivial adjustments. They are direct interventions in the activation threshold of the habit loop, making the desired behavior easier to initiate and the undesired behavior harder to access. The fourth variable is identity. Research on long-term habit maintenance shows that people who frame their behavior change as an expression of identity. I am the kind of person who moves every day. Maintain habits significantly longer than people who frame it as a goal. I am trying to exercise more. Identity-based habits are self-reinforcing because every instance of the behavior provides evidence for the identity, and the identity motivates future instances. The behavior and the self-concept become mutually sustaining. The practical framework that emerges from all of this is straightforward. For habits you want to build, identify a specific, reliable cue, ideally attached to an existing behavior. Define the simplest possible version of the routine. Create an immediate reward, reduce friction to the minimum, and frame the behavior as an expression of who you are becoming rather than a goal you are chasing. For habits you want to break, identify the cue driving the loop. Identify the reward the routine is delivering. Design a substitute routine that delivers the same reward through a different behavior, and increase friction around the unwanted behavior to raise its activation threshold. Neither process is instantaneous. Research suggests that the time required for a behavior to become automatic ranges from 18 to over 200 days depending on the complexity of the behavior, the consistency of practice, and individual neurological variation. The number that circulates in popular culture, 21 days, has no scientific basis. What the research does consistently show is that the process is non-linear. Early repetitions produce the steepest neural change, and the rate of automaticity increase slows as the behavior approaches its encoded state. The beginning is the hardest part, not because it requires the most willpower, because the neural pathway is the least established and the habit loop is the least encoded. If you made it to the end of this video, you already understand something that most people never do, that your habits are not a reflection of your character. They are a reflection of your neurology. And neurology is changeable. The brain that built the habits you want to break is the same brain that will build the habits you want to keep, if you work with its mechanisms rather than against them. Start today with one habit, one cue, one routine, one reward, small enough that starting feels almost too easy. That smallness is not weakness. It is the beginning of a neural pathway that, with enough repetition, will eventually run itself. Share this video with someone who keeps trying and failing to build better habits. Because sometimes the most empowering thing you can offer someone is the understanding that they have not been failing. They have been using the wrong strategy. Subscribe to continue this journey, because the next video is going to reveal something that connects directly to every habit we have been exploring throughout this series. The anti-inflammatory life, what chronic inflammation really is, how it underlies most of the conditions we have discussed, and the daily habits that measurably reduce it at the cellular level. See you there.